Nikolay gazed disappointingly at the plate of plain pasta before him. "This is dinner?" he complained to his wife, Katya, with frustration evident in his voice. Katya remained composed as she replied, "There's no money for meat." Nikolay's anger only grew, the conciliating explanation falling on deaf ears. "Where did you spend it all? On useless things like nails and rags? I gave you my paycheck recently." Katya looked down at her neglected nails and let out a sigh. With a calm tone, she explained, "You gave me your paycheck 3 weeks ago, and it went towards groceries. I used my own paycheck for utilities and the loan payments. I didn't buy any rags for myself." Nikolay interjected, frustration evident in his voice. Yes, I trusted you." Silently, Katya began eating her meager portion. She was tired of the constant arguments and dissatisfaction in their household. The perpetual financial struggles and Nikolay's refusal to seek better job opportunities had worn her down. "You need to work harder to earn more money," he yelled. "Am I expected to toil like a horse from morning till night? Maybe you should cut back on your salon visits." Katya responded quietly, her voice filled with pent-up frustration. "I already work 2 jobs, despite not being a horse myself. What kind of work do you think I do? I spend my days conversing with chickens like you. Maybe you should try a job like that, where you sit around and get paid for doing nothing." Katya had some savings, but she was saving up for a new coat. Not because she desired a new one, but because she felt embarrassed wearing her old, worn-out coat to work. She did her best to conceal the scuffs and damages, sewing buttons and adding appliques, yet it was clear that it was time for a replacement. The next day, Katya went to the store and purchased a chicken, using money that was set aside. "It's nothing," she reassured herself. "This month, they promised a bonus. I'll add that to it." However, her husband was not impressed by the chicken. He looked disdainfully at the meal she had prepared and silently left the table, indicating that he had no intention of eating the meager food. After work, Nicholas went to his mother's place and had dinner there, claiming that his wife had spent all their money on a manicure and there was nothing to eat at home. His mother shook her head disapprovingly, regretting that her son had married such a spendthrift. She served him a generous portion of borscht that she had cooked in the hopes that it would last them a week. The elderly woman, too, was trying her best to save money. The cost of medicine had skyrocketed, forcing them to choose between nourishment and treatment. On payday, Nikolay only gave his wife half of the money. "I need a new winter jacket," he explained. "I've already been wearing this one for 2 years. Enough is enough." Katya was indignant. "And is it normal that I've been wearing the same coat for 5 years?" she retorted. "So you think it's either salons for nails or a new coat?" Her husband countered. Katya pointed out, "What about the loan? What about the utility bill? Who do you think pays for those?" Nikolay responded dismissively, "Are the utilities really that expensive?" Katya insisted, "Take a look for yourself." Nikolay shrugged. "There's more? Do I look like a woman who goes through the bills?" Katya's sobs echoed through the room as she bid farewell to her new coat. However, her husband paid no attention to her tears and silently retreated to the other room. "Don't be so dramatic. Instead, go warm up dinner for me," he barked from afar. The following day, everything seemed to slip out of Katya's grasp at work. After lunch, she dialed her boss, Ivan Trofimovich. "Katerina, I can't help but notice that something isn't right with you today. Are you facing any problems?" he inquired. "No," whispered Katya, yet tears betrayed her, rolling uncontrollably down her cheeks. "All right, let's take a moment to calm down." Ivan Trofimovich poured a glass of water from the decanter on the table and handed it to Katya. He waited patiently as she took a few sips and instructed her, "Now, tell me everything." And just like that, Katya spilled her heart out as if it were the absolute truth. She could no longer bear the burden alone, pretending that everything was fine. "Do you have any children?" the boss asked after hearing her story. No, she hesitated. I haven't dared to. Good, he affirmed. With a husband like yours, it's probably best not to have children. But that also means I can offer you some assistance. Our factory has a dormitory, a remnant of the past. The conditions aren't luxurious, but they are more than livable. One of our workers recently got married and moved out with her husband, leaving a vacancy. I'll write you a referral. Just don't take too long to decide, as there are others in need, he concluded, gently caressing Katya's hand as she looked at him with fearful eyes. Thank you, Ivan Trofimych, Katya said, wiping her tears. But please don't refuse right away. Take a week to think it over. The boss looked at her carefully before replying, and now go to work. Nicholas continued his silent treatment towards his wife, even skipping dinner to visit his mother after work. In an attempt to make amends, Katya bought some chops with the remaining money. However, her husband defiantly passed by the kitchen without a word. Yet at night, while Katya was asleep, Nicholas sneaked in and took half of the meat from the tray. Though Katya noticed the disappearance, she decided to say nothing, hoping for reconciliation. Just before lunch, Ivan Trofimych hurried into the room where Katya and the other women were working. Girls, I need your help. We have to urgently bring samples of our products to potential customers. Glancing at each other, the women averted their gazes and began making up excuses. However, Katya stepped up to assist. Ivan Trofimych, let me take care of it, she offered, rising from her desk. The customers were impressed with the samples, expressing admiration and promising a significant order. Katya couldn't help feeling uncomfortable, especially with one customer who focused not only on the products, but also on complimenting her. He even escorted her to the building's exit. Catherine, could we meet again sometime? He asked, hastily adding, strictly for business purposes, of course. Come pay us a visit at the factory, Katerina beamed, her spirits lifted as she strolled leisurely toward the bus stop. Unexpectedly, she spotted Nikolai heading into a nearby establishment with another man. Curiosity piqued, Katya approached discreetly and glimpsed at the sign. It was a cafe. Through the expansive window, she observed her husband savoring the dishes set before him with relish. Determined to uncover the source of her husband's newfound dining extravagance, Katerina entered the cafe and discreetly took a seat at a neighboring table to eavesdrop before causing a scene. Perhaps this man was treating Nikolai to a meal out of gratitude. The tables were separated by small partitions, providing her with some concealment. The ribs are outstanding today, the stranger remarked. Indeed, Nikolai replied, although the salad lacks proper dressing and salt. It suits my taste just fine. I'm not so sure. You're just being finicky, the man chuckled. Have you forgotten what your wife serves you for dinner? I don't dine at home anymore, Nikolai boasted. Do you frequent restaurants then? No, I visit my mother. She knows how to feed a man properly, and I can't afford dining out twice a day. Doesn't Katerina wonder why you provide her so little money? The stranger inquired. Yes, Nikolai sighed. She thinks my salary remains the same as it was 2 years ago. There's no need for her to know my actual earnings. In fact, I plan to stop giving her money altogether soon. She'll manage just fine. After all, she's living in my apartment. What if she leaves? The man pressed. Who needs her? Nikolai callously replied. She's got no grace and no allure. While listening to this, Katerina felt a surge of anger and the urge to confront her husband. She couldn't believe he had the audacity to speak about her in such a demeaning way. Wiping away her tears, she emerged from her hiding place and addressed him defiantly. You're wrong, Kolya. I'm leaving you and filing for divorce, she declared. Come on, you're being hysterical. Don't embarrass yourself and just leave, Nikolai responded dismissively, quickly recovering from his wife's sudden appearance. He then turned to their companion and said, See? What did I say? Not only does she look like a homeless woman and can't cook, but she's also hysterical, tired of her dramatics. Katerina couldn't bear his insults. She glanced around at the cafe's patrons, who were enthralled by the unfolding spectacle, and retorted with frustration, "Do you know why I look this way? It's because he spends his salary on himself. Meanwhile, I work 2 jobs, using my hard-earned money to pay the bills, repay loans, and provide for this thoughtful husband's meals. On top of that, he's feeding his pensioner mother without considering that her pension is barely enough to survive on. I'm done with this." With that, Katerina turned away and headed for the exit, leaving the cafe in a heavy silence. Hysterical, Nikolay shouted after her, but she didn't even bother to turn around. Sitting across from Nikolay, their companion spoke up, saying, "And indeed, Kolya, your wife can't be accused of spending all the money on herself. And it's not right to take advantage of an elderly woman either. You don't contribute to her meals, do you? I highly doubt it. You squander your money on kefas and clothes. And let's not forget you're also cheating on your wife." Nikolay tried to defend himself, but the other person interrupted, saying, "I'm not interested in your excuses. I can see that everything she said is true. I'm sorry, but I can't sit at the same table with you." The man angrily threw some bills on the table before storming out of the room. Nikolay seethed with anger as he thought, "Well, he won't be getting any more from me." Impatiently waiting for the end of the workday, Nikolay rushed home. He shouted, "Katya," from the doorway, but there was no response. Worried something was wrong, he quickly searched the living room and bedroom, finding no trace of Katerina. As his anxiety grew, he opened the closet and discovered her clothes were gone. Panicking, he checked the kitchen, only to find it empty except for the apartment keys on the dining room table. "Fine then. We'll see how long you can last. You'll come crawling back," he muttered angrily. Meanwhile, Katya stood in front of the mirror, admiring her new clothes. Ever since she left her husband, she had unexpectedly found herself with some extra money that she had been saving. Today, while putting some of her paycheck into a box as usual, she discovered a considerable stack of bills. Astonished, she counted the money and sat down on the bed in disbelief. The new coat she had been eyeing was now within reach, and she even had enough for a pair of new boots. Surprised by her sudden good fortune, she shared the news with her roommate Svetlana, who chuckled and said, "Well, aren't you surprised? It's not like Santa Claus put them there." Overwhelmed, Katerina whispered, "I don't even know what to think." Svetlana reassured her, "There's nothing to think about. You barely have any expenses living in the dormitory, no loans to pay, and you eat like a bird. It's no surprise that you have extra money. You could survive on just one paycheck, but you're working a second job for what reason?" Katya and Svetlana ventured to the shopping center together, where they carefully selected a coat and boots. Satisfied with their purchases, they decided to celebrate with ice cream at a nearby cafe. As they indulged in their sweet treats, Svetlana mischievously asked if Roman, a client Katya had previously met with, would be joining them today. Roman had been pursuing Katya since she moved into the dormitory, and although she initially rejected his advances, Sveta convinced her to give him a chance. "Let him prove that not all men are like your ex, Nikolay," Sveta had encouraged. Today marked their 3rd date together. Typically, they would go for walks in the park, as Katya felt self-conscious about her wardrobe. However, today she felt confident enough to accept Roman's invitation to a cafe. Meanwhile, Nikolay sat alone at a table, sullenly picking at his plate of pasta. He had no money in his pockets. In the first month after Katya left, he continued to live as if nothing had changed, even finding some solace in not having to provide for his wife anymore. However, his ignorance soon caught up with him when he received a phone call. "Your loan payment is overdue. We have added penalties, and we expect payment soon." The voice on the other end scolded. Nikolay was outraged. How could this be? Wasn't it Katya's responsibility to pay off the loan? He angrily called his wife to confront her. "The loan is under your name. and the item bought with that credit is still in your possession. Why should I pay for it?" Katya calmly responded before ending the call. After some time, the utility debts were added to Nikolai's already accumulating loan arrears. He had never been concerned about who paid the bills, which turned out to be quite large considering his constant forgetfulness to turn off lights and water. With no other choice, Nikolai used his salary to pay off the debts, leaving him with very little money. Desperate, he turned to his mother for help, but she was not at home as she had been hospitalized. Due to struggling to feed Nikolai with her meager pension, his mother couldn't afford the necessary medications and ended up suffering complications that led to her hospitalization. Even having dinner at his mother's house could no longer save Nikolai. With the last bit of money he had, he bought the cheapest pasta, hoping to make it through until his next paycheck, all the while cursing Katerina. After a week of surviving on this meager diet, Nikolai could no longer bear to even look at the pasta. In an attempt to quell his hunger, he decided to go for a walk on his day off. As he strolled through the streets, he couldn't help but notice how the townspeople leisurely walked around, enjoying meals at cafes and restaurants. It was then that Nikolai spotted his ex-wife in the window of one of the restaurants, laughing and engaging in conversation with a well-dressed man seated across from her. Suddenly filled with an overwhelming mix of emotions, Nikolai quickly turned around and rushed back home to his cold plate of macaroni.